by many, literally. And therefore, one person represents the many, and he gets the shlichus out of that same pasuk. The Dilma shiny husband, but maybe that case is really different. The Islay shutfos begavayu, because again, the individual doing the shchita is also going to eat from it. He's not a pure shliach. He's a partner in that korban. So Elamihacha. So maybe Rabbi Yochanan uses a different pasuk. V'yichu lehem ish sel beis avos sel bayis. That one person should take for them a lamb for the family and for the household. So the family means he and his wife and his kids, and maybe his in-laws, and his household means his Eved Ibrim and even his Eved Kanainim, who all get to eat from the same korban. The Dilma Hasam Nami the Islay Shutvis Begavayu. But in that case, too, it's not pure shlichus, because the one guy is the head of the chabura, and he's doing it, so he's part of it. Okay, Imkain, if that's your problem, try cry lamali. Why do I need two psukim? We also learned already that you can be a shliach and also be part of it. Im einu inyan hecha deshayich. So we have to say this pasuk doesn't work if the guy is not part of the chabura. Okay? Tenehu inyan lehecha delo shayich. We have since, even though he's included in that pasuk, since we have other psukim that say essentially the same thing, we have to say we're extending the idea to, even though it doesn't say it specifically, to people who are not shutfim, who aren't nogeya in the Indian. Hi, mi boyle, kid the Rebbe Yitzchak. So now we're going to argue. We're going to say that pasuk has use elsewhere by someone else, and therefore is not available to teach shlichus. That hi meboile the Rebbe Yitzchak. This pasuk is used by Rebbe Yitzchak. The Omer Rebbe Yitzchak. Rebbe Yitzchak says, "Each zoiche v'lo hakotten zoiche." That pasuk has the word ish in it. Yikchu lohem ish. So that he uses that word ish to say it has to be a male adult who does it. It can't be a child. A kid can't do it. So he's used the pasuk up, and you can't use it for shlichus. Hahume ish lefi achlo. That pasuk is derived. The idea, Reb Yitzchak, the Gemara is coming back and say, yeah, but Reb Yitzchak has other choices. He can learn a different pasuk and leave this pasuk alone so he can learn shlichus. Hahume ish lefi ochlo. He can take the pasuk, each man according to his capacity to eat. So in other words, a smaller person may only get a kazayas, but a bigger person may get 2 or 3 kazasim. And that's, you measure out the seh based on each person's ability to consume the meat. Okay, so therefore the other pasuk is still available for shlichus. Va'akati mi boile, but we still have a problem. Okay, because the shochtin as a pesach al hayachid, we're learning from the ish pasuk that one guy does the shchita, even according at this is now just a havamina. Even if everybody is paired up in chaburas and there's one guy left who's not part of a chabura, he could shech the pesach on his own for himself. Now we're all all have in our minds that we have to eat up the whole thing, and at least lachatchila there can't be anything left. Okay, so when you ask the question, Can you make sandwiches on the next day out of the leftover Pesach meat? The answer is no, sir. That's a joke. No, sir. Supposed to laugh. I have to give you mechila for that. Okay. So Savar Commander Omer. So we say Rabbi Yonasan doesn't have that issue because he doesn't agree with that idea that you could do a Korban Pesach where you know in advance they're going to be leftovers. Sover lo Commander Omer in Shochtinas a Pesach al Hayakim. He agrees with the view that you cannot slaughter for one person. Ella Hada Omer Rav Gidol Omer Rav. Now we're asking a new question. What about Rav Gidol's concept that Menayin Sheshlucho Shel Adam Kamoiso? That a shaliach is as if the guy is doing it himself. He's, so to speak, the man's hand. He carries out the duty, but he has no das of his own. He's doing it al das the Baal, the person who sent him. Shenemar, the nasi echad mimate. The words are repeated. One leader from each tribe. When Yehoshua divvied up the land, every Jew didn't come and say, I want this, I want this. He set blocks of territory and allocated them to the Nesiim of the different 11 tribes. Okay, so Tipukle Shlichos Mehocha. So why don't we say there that that's the shlichus, that by the leaders? The stabra daha shlichus who is it? That's a question. Shlichus the shlichus who. Does it make sense to say that the Nesiim from the Shvatim were acting as shluchim for the various individual families who would later he would dole it out to? But what about the father? I mean, you're talking about a few million people. There are obviously orphans in that group. Just out of pure logic, there are orphans in that group. And an orphan cannot be represented by a shliach. Okay? So, Ella kiha the Rava bar Rav Huna, we have to be saying that he's acting like Rava bar Rav Huna says. The Omer Rava bar Rav Huna, Omer Rav Gidel, Omer Rav. We have a Messiah going back to Rav. Minayin shezachin la'adim shelo lefanov. We've had this idea before. How do we know that I can do something to benefit Zev, even if Zev isn't there? Shenemar v'nasi echad, nasi echad. The Nesiim were collecting the land on behalf of the whole Shevet, and the whole Shevet wasn't there. So you see that he was doing things to benefit people. The Stavros, do we say that when he doled it out to his group, no, the theory now has to be that he's acting for the benefit of everybody in his Shevet, and therefore he can do it without them being there, and he's just doing it. It's not specifically a shliach.
Yeah, what the Gemara is saying is that even though there could be a cotton, and even though he may not be a shliach for the cotton, but Zochen.
Correct. He can still, we'll get to that. Well, he still benefits him. But the problem with that, he could all, the adults, when he gets home to his Shevet, the adults can all say, I want this beautiful fertile piece. I want that beautiful fertile piece. And this cotton, who is an orphan, has nobody to speak up for him, he winds up with a rocky, crummy piece on a hill somewhere. The Ika, the Nichale Bahar. So now we're saying there's another issue. Even among the adults, even though everybody gets a reasonable piece, nobody is intentionally disadvantaged. Nonetheless, I like living on the fourth floor. You like living on the first floor. It says there are people, there are people who come along to Ika Nichale Bahar. Somebody would rather have land on the hill. And somebody else, below Nichala Babika, he doesn't want a valley. The Ika, the Nichale Babika, and there's another fellow that would rather be in the valley, below Nichale Bahar. He doesn't want to be in the mountain. Nonetheless, when the Nasi doles it out, there are so many people in the Shevet that somebody, even an adult, even though he can complain, he's going to wind up not getting for his first choice. So how do you say he's acting on behalf of everybody to their benefit, not in their presence? And not everybody is going to be benefited. Ella Kedarava Barhuna. So we have to rethink and we have to take the view of Rava Bar Rav Huna, the Omer Rava Bar Rav Huna, Omer Rav Gidel, Omer Rav. Same idea, same source, but a little different statement. Rava, the Omer Rava Bar Rav Huna, Omer Rav Gidel, Omer Rav. Minayin Yisaimim Shabo Lachala. What happens when orphans, in a regular case, not at this point in time, but in a normal case, somebody dies, his children want to divvy up his stuff. Okay? So they're minors. So they go to the court and the court acts on their behalf. Shebezdin ma'amidin lehem apitropos. The court appoints a guardian ad litem, an apitrop, a custodian, a guardian for each kid, one for each kid. And they represent that kid's interests. L'chov u'leschus. And whether it's a negative thing, one kid wants mommy's silver brooch and he doesn't get it. He gets daddy's silver tie clip. That's how the apotropos divvied it up. That's Liganai. Or somebody wants the mommy's earrings and gets them. That's Lisnus. Okay, so whatever it works out, as long as at the end the distribution is financially equal, that's the deal. L'chavamai. But how can the apotropos act to the not interest of the kid? Okay, that wouldn't work. So Ella, we have to say like this: L'chav almanas l'schus. They're trying to equalize the distribution to everybody, and sometimes somebody gets disappointed. But the idea is that he should benefit, that he should get an equal cut of the stuff. Talmud Lomer, the Nasi Echad, Mate Tikhu, that the princes take the land and dole it out to their shevet. They do the best job they can. And even though somebody is a little bit disappointed, they're actually acting for the benefit of everybody in the tribe. Okay. Now, what happens in my example? I don't remember what it was, but somebody got I think a tie clip he didn't want, right? Or maybe he got he'd rather have the brooch and not the tie clip. I think that was my example. So now he got a tie clip he didn't want. Amar Rab Nachman Omer Shmuel Yesamim Shabol Lechaluk B'chnissei Avihem, when the kids come to have divvy up the metaltalin of the parent. Bezdin Ma'amidin Lehem Apitropos, the Bezdin appoints these legal guardians. Oh, Borarim Lehem Chelek Yafa, and the agents try their best to make a very nice distribution that satisfies everybody. The Im Higdilo, but when the kids grow up, when they reach maturity, bar mitzvah age, Yoichlin lamachos. They can go back to the Bezdin. Yeah.
I don't understand. If the heirs had nothing before and now they're getting something, isn't that automatically a benefit, even if it's up on a mountain?
Yeah, but did you ever divvy up the stuff of a deceased parent?
Never.
Well, I did. And we fought tooth and nail down to my mother had tchotchkes, costume jewelry. It wasn't worth anything. And there was only one earring. And my brother almost beat me up because he wanted that earring. And I had put it in the other pile. Your emotions are raw. People have emotional connection to things well off of their financial value. That's why my parents put labels like on everything in the break front. This is for him, this is for him. But the stupid costume jewelry at the bottom of the jewelry box, you didn't allocate. And we fought about it. So here, a kid's he was 11 years old. He got this item he really didn't want. And now he's 13 in the day of his bar mitzvah. If it's not Shabbos, the minute after, hey, everybody says Mazel Tov and gives him a fountain pen. He's in the Bezdin complaining. That's what's happening, okay? Yochelim Chos, they're allowed to complain to the Bezdin. And the Bezdin would have to now reopen the case and reallocate the junk. Okay? Rab Nachman Didei Amar, but Rab Nachman himself said, problem with that is, im higdilo einam yochlim limchos, the im ken makayach Bezdin yafa. If you allow the children when they grow up to reopen the case, so what you're basically saying is when a Bezdin makes a decision, it can be reopened. The Bezdin doesn't really have the power to paskin a case. And that is weakening the Kayach of Bezdin. V'mi Islay Reb Nachman imkein ma Kayach Bezdin yafa. But now we're going back and forth. Now, did Reb Nachman really say that you can't reopen a case because then the Bezdin's judgment is not considered final? V'hatanan, we have a Mishnah that says, now we had been taught, all right, what happens if I owe Ruvain money and I can't pay? So Bezdin steps in and sells my property to get the money to pay Ruvain back. Okay, so Marty wants to buy my property. So the Bezdin appoints an appraiser who comes up with a fair price, right? So Shum Hadayanim Shepichtei Shtus. What happens if the Bezdin, with their appraisal, are off? They are too low by more than a sixth. So it's worth 100, and they say 87 or 82. In other words, it's off by more than 1/6. Okay. Oh, Husru Shtus. Or their appraiser says it's worth 118, which is again more than the 6. So what happens? Machron batel. It's ono, and the transaction is rescinded, reevaluated, and the buyer has to pay a little more or gets a refund of some money. Okay, that's the Tanakama over there. Now, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Aimer, Machran Kayam, even though it was undervalued or overvalued by more than a 6th, where it stands, the Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Imkain, Ma Kayach Bezdin Yafeh, even though the Bezdin erred in making the evaluation, we consider the principle of a Bezdin always can rule or trumps the idea of the buyer got a deal or got a disadvantage somewhat. Okay. The Omer of Huna bar Chanina, Omer of Nachman. So now we have again what Rab Nachman said. Before we just said Rab Nachman says you can reopen. Now we're saying halacha of Divrei Chachamim, you can reevaluate when there's an error. So now we have different people saying different things of what Rab Nachman holds, and we don't know how to handle the sanctity of a Bezdin's sock. Let's put it that way. Look, Kasha, it's not really a problem. Turn the page. Ha de ta'u, ha de lo ta'u. In the case of the overpaying, Marty's overpaying or underpaying, that's a real error that the Bezdin made. And it's not reasonable to say if they acknowledge they made an error that they can't correct it. Ha de lo ta'u. In the case of divvying up the property for the little kids, the Bezdin acted without making an error. The kid got his $100 worth and his brother got his $100 worth. Each kid got the same value. It's just that one kid's disappointed with what's in his pile. That's not an error on the part of the Bezdin. So if the Bezdin did not make a mistake, why does Shmuel say that they can complain later on if they were dissatisfied at the distribution? Now what we're saying is we're not talking about metaltal. We're talking about Daddy had a big field, and one kid got the east side of the field, and the other kid got the west side of the field. And then later on, the guy on the east says, yeah, but your field gets more sunlight. Mine's got woods. In other words, even though it may be fiscally the same value, maybe even a little bit larger to adjust the price, nonetheless, I want a farm and you gave me a forest. My brother lives in Manhattan. He doesn't need the farm. Why did you give him the farm? So then they can go and complain to Bezdin, and the Bezdin might work it out. Rav Nachman, ha'achin, shecholku harei hen lekuchos. Now, we're making a new statement. When you divvy up land, unlike tchotchkes, at the moment the father dies, we'll keep it 2 sons, but it applies to any number of sons. The children have an undivided interest in the whole piece of land. The older son has 2/3 undivided interest. The younger son has a 1/3 undivided interest. So when they draw the line and put the boundary between who gets which side, it is in effect like this. Reuven, who's the older son, buys out the 2/3 on the other side of the field. And Shimon, who gets 1/3, buys out the third of the 2/3 that Reuven's going to get. So in a sense, inheriting land, you're buying part from your sibling and he's buying part from you. That's how the distribution works, okay? So pachas mishtus, if when they do this deal, they're off by a 1/6, it's too low, nikna mikach. Nevertheless, since they agreed, the deal stands, okay? And yeser al shtus, if the one brother overpays by more than a 1/6, nevertheless, okay, then batel mekach, then it is canceled, and they start over.
If more than a six
Now,
is
what if that's more than a 6? That's that 87 or no 80. Yeah, no 83. So because a 6 is 16.2.66, so 17 is the cutoff, right? So, but what happens in some bizarre circumstance where it's exactly b'diuk a 6 to the penny, or in this case to the pruta? Okay, so what happens then? Kana umachsir ono. So in that case, everybody keeps the land that he was assigned, but the one who underpaid gives a little money to equalize to his brother, or the one who overpaid takes a little money from his brother to equalize, and they're both the same, right? Because one is giving the money to the other because of from each perspective, it's either over or under. So there's only one monetary transfer. Okay. Now those are the basic rulings that we have. Amarava ha da amran pachas mishtus niknema mikach. According to Rava, if we're talking about land that the deal stands, even if somebody was disadvantaged because the differential is more than 16.6666 ad infinitum. Lo amrun elidalo shavia sholiach. That only works if the two brothers did this face to face. But if the brother who's disadvantaged had appointed a shaliach to act for him, okay, then he avo shavia shliach. If he did appoint a shliach, Omer tekune shedortich v'lo la'avonas la'avnuse. The brother can time it to the shliach. You didn't do what I wanted. I wanted you to act and get me my fair share, and you screwed me out of a my piece of land. So you did not represent me properly, and that's why we say that the deal doesn't stand. Not because the Bezdin's deal is canceled. There is no Bezdin. Here, it's like an American court where you say that you had insufficient counsel and you appeal your conviction because your lawyer didn't do a good job. That's the case here. So what about when we said that if the error is greater than a 6, the reaction is void? To be okay. Lo amran ela de lo amr nifligain b'shuma de beidina. That's when the brothers did not charge Bezdin with the job of evaluating and doing it. If both of the brothers sign a document, we're going to rely on what the Bezdin does. We think the Bezdin is going to act fairly. Aval Omer Niflag Bishuma de Bedina. We will accept the evaluation of the Bezdin. Machran Kayam. Then the error is irrelevant. They agreed to accept the ruling, and the deal is the deal, and Bezdin's authority is maintained. The Tanan, even a bad decision by Bezdin is still affirmed. The Tanan, Shum Hadayanim, Shepichasai Shtus. If the Bezdin evaluates and it comes out to be more than a 6, too little money, or too much by more than a 6, Machrin Batel, the deal is canceled. That was the Tanakama. But Reb Shimon ben Gamaliel, Machrin Kayam, it still holds. Okay. The Amran Stus Kana Umachsir Ono. So when we said earlier that the actual distribution of the land stands, but we compensate the one who is disadvantaged by giving him money, what's the deal there? Lo Amra now, we're changing the whole concept. We're not talking about land. We're talking about metaltalin. Lo Amran ela b'metaltale. We're talking about mommy's jewelry and the stuff in the break front and the table and the chairs and the sofa. Aval bekarke, but when it comes to land, ein ola karkaos. There is no such thing as ono'o when it comes to property. And we see it in Century Village. Somebody, what? You put your hand up or you're just scratching? Okay. Two apartments on the fourth floor of Ainsley are available. They're pretty much identical. They both had a kitchen renewal 2 years ago. They both have 2 bedrooms, and the one guy sells for $220 because he gets a buyer willing to pay $220, and the other guy lucks out and sells for $270 because he gets some idiot who's willing to pay $270. The value of land or the value of real estate is based on what a buyer and a seller, knowing buyer, knowing seller, strike a deal at. And it changes with every transaction. So how do you tell me that an appraisal is not b'diuk to the penny? I've had occasion where I was trying to get a mortgage and the bank underestimated the property, so they wouldn't give me the amount of money I wanted. And I said to them, get me another appraisal. And they got me another appraisal, and I got the mortgage because the other appraiser didn't lowball. So it's not applicable to land. Avol, haluk b'mishkachasa. That is the case. Here's what they're doing. They divide the land by measuring the side and then slicing it based on a mathematical measure. Okay? So when they do that, if one guy's piece is a couple of inches smaller than the last guy's piece, a little bit smaller, they didn't measure exactly perfectly, the deal stands. All right. Get the Rava, and that goes like Rava to Omer Rava, called Dover, anytime the price is determined in one of 3 ways. Shebamida, according to measurement, you fold the thing in half. I get this part, Reuben gets this part. That's measurement. Or you weigh the gold bars and you put some on this side and some on that side till they're equal. The balance beam is level. Okay. Oh, Shabaminya. Or it's sold by number. You buy a dozen eggs and you open the box and only has 11 eggs in it. In any of those cases, afilu pachos miktei ano nami chayzer. Even I used a dozen eggs as a perfect example because 1/6 of a dozen eggs is 2. There was only 1 egg missing from the box. But if I thought I was buying a dozen eggs, I'm entitled to get another egg from the guy or get my money back. And in any of these cases, if I thought I was getting 100 by 100 and it winds up being 100 by 97, I can get my money back. If the balance beam doesn't work properly and I didn't get the amount of gold I thought I was going to get, I get my money back in all those cases. Even if the error is not on the din of a 6th up or a 6th down. What?
Instead of eggs, it was grain, flour or something, and it was less than a 6th.
If it was sold by weight, if the bag says 5 pounds of flour and it has 4.95 pounds of flour, you're entitled to your money back or the refund of the difference, or trade it for a bag that weighs the right amount. By weight, by measure, or by count, then ono'o doesn't apply. They have to give you what you thought you bought. Okay? I practiced that, thought you bought. Okay. Good. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Haditanan, but what about a Mishnah that says, Hasholeach es ba'era biyad chereshat of a cotton. You have to, tomorrow night, you have to say Havdalah, where you light your Havdalah candle from an existing flame. That's why my wife does a 3-day yahrzeit candle, so it has a shot of staying lit. Now, Ruvain only used a 1-day candle. So Ruvain sends his wife because he has trouble walking, and she says, we don't have an open flame. Could you give us a candle? So I have my grandson there, and he says, let me do it. So I give the 8-year-old the burning candle, and actually a burning oil lamp, and he's running across, and he spills the oil, and he burns up Marty's car. Okay? That's the case. Hashaleach es haba'era, he sends the open flame, biyat chereshat of a cotton, in the hands of someone who's incompetent, either because he's deaf and dumb, or he's too young, or he's an idiot. I mean, literally a technical idiot. Potter midine adam, the Baal, the guy who sent the kid, in terms of a Bezdin, doesn't have to pay for Marty's car. Chayev v'dei shemayim, but if I don't pay for Marty's car, God is going to hit me with lightning, okay, and burn my car. Now, what if the kid is 15? He's not a cut. So Pikeya Chayev, then the kid who tripped and burned Marty's car has to pay the insurance, has to pay the deductible for Marty's car. But why is the din different? Why if I sent the kid, why don't I have to fix Marty's car b'dei Adam? Name a shlucho shel Adam k'maiso. Why don't we say that the agent represents me, is effectively me, and I burned Marty's car, I owe the money, and he can sue me in Bezdin? Why don't we say that? Shani Hassam, there is a difference. The Ein Shliach Devar Aveira, you cannot appoint the Shliach to do something bad. You can only appoint a Shliach to do something good.
But this is not really an Aveira.
Sure, it's an Aveira. The kid was negligent, and if he had been walking carefully, he wouldn't have burned your car. He was running, the oil spilled, and it flamed your car. It's not really an onus. An onus is if lightning hit your car. Here, he's a pusher. If a guy drops a tool from the roof and hits somebody, why does he go to the Ari Miklat? He's an onus. His hand was slippery, it fell. Because there is an element of negligence. And here too, there's an element of negligence. The Amrin and Divrei Rav, we have a list of people. The Divrei, supposing we have a rabbi and his student, Divrei Rav, the Divrei Talmud, and somebody comes, the rabbi said something, and the student said something else. Who's right? Obviously, the Rebbe. So in life, God is the Rebbe, and we are the Talmud, and the halacha is the halacha, and you follow the halacha. Okay? Divrei Misha Shoimim, who do you listen to? Obviously, you listen to God. And the kid is negligent, and therefore, but he wasn't intentionally negligent. He's a little kid. So I don't have to pay according to din of Bezdin. But God says I should have been smart and lagon myself or sent my wife, adult. So therefore, I'm chayav b'dei shemayim. V'ha'datanya. But what about the following Mishnah? Shaliach shelo asa shlichaso. If the agent doesn't do exactly what he was told to do, and here is the case now. This is an interesting case. I give the shliach a $50 bill, and I say, go with this $50 bill and buy a $50 sheep and bring it to the Beis Hamikdash as a shlomim or as a whatever the korban is. Now the guy goes to the sheep guy, and the sheep guy has not had the best of days. So he puts up a sign, special sale, 10% off, sheep are $45. Okay? So he pays the $45 and he's got a $5 bill left. And there's a carvel right there that's a kosher carvel. And he buys himself an ice cream with the $5 because I said, here's $50 to buy a $50 sheep. Now, the problem is that when I gave him the $50 bill, I was makdish the $50 bill. The $50 bill is now Kodesh. So when he buys the ice cream cone, that's Meila. Okay, that's the case. Shaliach shalosa shlichaso. If he doesn't do exactly what he was told and pay $50 for the $50 sheet, shliach moel, and then he uses the change, the shliach is over on Mila. Asa shlichaso. But if he did exactly what he was supposed to do, and the sheep were really $45 all along, and I gave him the $50 bill, and I say to him, buy the sheep, and he buys the sheep. If he does everything perfectly, then Baal Habayis Moel. It's my fault, the misappropriation of the $5. Okay? Ki asa shlichoso the Baal Habayis. Because he did exactly what he was supposed to do, so he remained my hand, as it were, and it was I that bought the ice cream cone, so to speak. Balabayas mehamoel. So in that case, the Balabayas is indeed guilty of the Me'ila. Am I? Why? Name ein shliach dvar aveira. The reason is that you can't have agency to do something wrong. So when he bought the ice cream cone, in that case, it was my error. And therefore, I'm guilty of Mila. So now the Gemara says, yeah, but Mila is a special situation. It's not normal. Shiny Mila. Mila is different than other cases. The Yalfa Chet Mitruma. We learned back and forth to Truma. Doing something wrong with Truma, doing something wrong with Hektish. Okay, Ma Truma, Sheshava Shliach, just like I can ask Marty to take my Truma for me, Af Me'ila Shave Shliach, so too, I can actually appoint an agent to do Me'ila on my behalf, even though normally a shliach can't do something wrong that breaks the shlichus. Here, I may have even said to him, but here's hektish money, buy the sheep, and buy an ice cream with the rest. I gave him that instruction. It's obviously my fault. So neilef mina. So let's learn Mila as a general principle and say anytime the shliach does exactly what he was told, and one of the components of his shlichus is to do something wrong, it is a valid shlichus. Mishum dahave meila v'shlichus yad shnei ksuvim aboyim kiechad. The case of Mila and the case of Truma are two psukim that both say you can point to Shliach. So it's two psukim that have the same rule, and the general principle is you can't learn more than the stated things in those two psukim, okay? V'chol shnei ksuvim haboyim ki echad ein melamdin. You can't expand on them and learn new things. Okay, so let's see. So Me'ila hada amran, but here one of the pasukim is talking about Me'ila. Shlichus yad mahi. Where can you see in psukim that if I tell him to do something wrong, it's my fault? The Sanya, the Brisa teaches, I'll call Dvar Pesha. There's a Brisa that teaches us, a pasuk says, on anything where it creates a liability. Beis Shammai Oimrim l'chayev al hamachshava b'maisa. Kimaisa, I'm sorry. That if you think you're going to buy the ice cream cone, but you don't actually do it, it's like you bought the ice cream cone, and that would be already over Mila just by thinking it. Ubeis Hillel Omrim Ein Chayev Ad Shishaliach Bo Yad. He's not liable until he actually does buy the ice cream cone. Yeah, but here it's the money is Kadesh. I'm just sticking to the same example. Okay, and if he misappropriates Kadosh, so since the $50 bill was Kadosh, buying the ice cream cone, and maybe I wasn't clear about that. So sheyishlach bo yad until he actually does the act. Shenemar im lo shalach yado, etc. If he didn't actually do it, that pasuk says that he didn't actually take the stuff. Amru beis Shammai lebeis Hillel, so they argue. Beis Shammai says, Halon nemar al kol dvar pesha. Pasuk already told us, in my opinion, that he has a liability just for thinking. Amru lahem beis Hillel lebeis Shammai, he replies, Halon nemar, but doesn't it also say, Im lo shalach yado b'meleches re'ehu, if he did not take the other guy's things or the work of the other person. So Amru beis Shammai lebeis Hillel, he replied, they say back, Im kain, I'll call dvar pesha lamali. What's that part of the pasuk doing there? Sheyachol, beis Hillel says, without that phrase in the pasuk, ainli elahu, that the shaliach has to do exactly what the sender told him, A to Z, every single aspect. And Amr of those shalucho menayin, how do I know that I can have my servant or my agent and they do something wrong, that they are liable? Talmud Lomer, I'll call Dvar Pesha. If the shliach messes up, he's responsible. That was the first case where I thought he was going to pay $50 for the sheep. He got change and he misappropriated the change instead of putting in the pishka in the Beis Hamikdash. So Beis Hillel, everything works according to Beis Hillel that way, because now we're using the word pesha to say that the agent deviating from the plan, he's guilty himself. Ela Beis Shammai lemukme le lahai kra b'machshava b'makamaisa, who used up the word pesha as talking about thought is equal to deed. Neilef minei, let's learn me'ila as a global principle that a shliach can be appointed. He has to do exactly what is told. If he doesn't, it's his fault. And somebody will pick up tomorrow in Yetz Hashem It has been a pleasure doing this. Thank you all for being present and listening. And again, if I disturbed or upset anybody, I ask Mechila.
Go ahead. Thank you very much for your seriousness.
Hey.
4 to 2, 7.
Okay. 8 o'clock. Oh, I don't know what time tonight. Tomorrow morning is at 8 o'clock.
Tonight, 4 to
There's a
7.
mincha at 3.
3 and come
What time is
4
tonight?
to 7.
I'm not completely knowledgeable. Wait, there's the thing here. I swear to God.
6:45.
6:45 is called Lidre.
6:45 is called Lidre, and 5 of 7 is the rabbi.
Tomorrow morning.
8 o'clock.
What? Tomorrow morning is 8 o'clock.
And you're not doing the daf tomorrow.
No. We're gonna learn today, Ruby. 2 o'clock, 10 of 2 live. Okay.
10 to 2 is, yeah.
Quarter to 2,
Quarter.
so that we can get the Gemara done, and then we'll drive over for Mincha.
What time?
What time? What? Mincha's at 3. Ruven is learning with me at 1:45.
What time you going over?
If you want to join us, you're welcome.
What time you going over?
Ready?
I'm on my way.
What is it?
I'll be right there.
Okay, thank you.
Does she know where to find you?
I don't know. I didn't.
So, Bob, push him out to the hall. So when his aide comes, she'll see him.
Okay. You ready to go? Got your seatbelt on? Just get my feet up here.
He has to get his feet on their stirrups.
Okay. You got your seatbelt on? This goes with you too? Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
You didn't know there was a Carvel right next to the sheep seller in Yerushalayim, did you? See, you learned something new. I don't know, maybe it was Baskin Robbins.
One thing in this field was very unique that was able to buy in the battles.
Yeah. Well, that according to some, I mean, they don't have the Mahadrin. They only have regular kashrus. So I wouldn't. But okay, I think they call it McDubbin.
I know, I don't remember. Could be.
But in any event, all the chains, like there's now a smash burger in Boca that's kosher.
Isn't that the one that was opened by the guy who
By the guy who owns the dairy, the bagel store.
that same area?
It's down, if you're standing looking into the parking lot, it's to the left. As far as you can go without turning, it's right there.